Go. Okay. Hey guys. Okay, let me figure out. This is my first time having a guest on here. Okay, that's three of us. Maybe two. No, not that one. How do I remove this? Okay,
Oh, there.
perfect. There we go. Okay. Hey everyone. So welcome to our discussion. I'm so excited to have Megan on. Megan has been monumental in my life for the past, few years. I had you as a senior. You taught personal finance, and that was like our first meeting together. And then after that, I got the opportunity to help with Mule Rider Sense, and I knew nothing about personal finance. And so the one person I knew to reach out to was Megan because I had her in class. And you were great. Our friendship started from there. So, and then even after we've moved to Texas, we've kind of kept in touch and different things. So, why don't you introduce yourself and like what you do and just any fun facts you want to tell everyone?
I don't know if I have any real fun facts, but as Carly mentioned, I was a finance professor at Southern Arkansas University, and I loved teaching people about finance. And currently, I actually left teaching last year to become a financial advisor, where I actually work one on one with families and couples and help them as they set goals and plan for their future. And I mean, in reality, I mean, it's you become a friend, so it's an advisor, a teacher. I still feel like I'm a teacher every day because I teach things to my clients. You know, I loved working with students, but there was an element that I needed a little bit more too. And I was getting to a point, as much as I love teaching, and I hope I get the opportunity to continue to do that some because I love college students. I was teaching a lot of the same classes over and over and over. And I think it just kind of got where I was looking for a little bit more. I felt like God was calling me to do something a little bit different. And so in my new career, I really just work one on one with my clients. I help them with financial planning, investment management. And overall, really, my goal with financial planning is helping people align their personal goals with their finances. So, for a lot of my clients, that is faith based. So I can't say that it's that way for all of my clients. But, most of my clients have some faith based goals and things that they really want to work towards. And so we set forth those goals and we meet together, and I really just kind of help guide them through the process of making sure that what they say they want actually matches up with what they're doing. I don't know if that really makes sense, but helping them track it, let's have a plan. We all know that if we write down our goals and we set forth goals in a written form, we're much more likely to actually achieve those goals than if we're kind of just out here floating and not working towards a specific goal. I mean, really, I hate to use that, but part of actually what I typed out in response to one of your questions that you had kind of alluded to was having SMART goals and making sure that we are making sure that we're using goals that we can measure and that are attainable. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a faith component for a lot of people where that's not always something it's got to be fluid and willing to change. And if the Spirit tells you something different than what you thought it was a year ago, we have to be able to make changes and adjustments. And so I really love what I do. I'm passionate about finance, and I'm passionate about helping people and teaching them and helping them make better choices with their money.
Thank you. That was wonderful. That's one thing too that I loved when I met you and we started developing Mule Rider Sense was your emphasis on setting goals. And when we talked about starting financial counseling under the organization, you were like, always make sure to bring them back to what their goals are. And I think sometimes, like for me, not being a finance major, I never thought about how finance and my goals go hand in hand. And even now talking about our faith, how like giving and our finance and our goals go hand in hand. And so whenever you opened that new perspective of, hey, like everything in your life, because everything revolves around money. So everything in your life when you set goals, it's going to revolve around finance, and always having that mentality of like, okay, what are my priorities? Like, what am I setting? What do I want my future to look like? That was just really cool because I think that takes managing money to a new level. It's like, I know it's personal finance, but it's like, oh, I have a purpose in this. I'm not just setting a budget. Like, I actually am like working with something. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, it's no different. I mean, if you're talking to college students and they have this goal, okay, how does this decision impact my goal? Does it create a path for me to get to that goal? And it's the same thing with my clients. If I have a husband and wife come in, I actually have them, we do some specific things where actually they really have a hard time sometimes actually picking their goals and setting those goals. So I have a way of like kind of narrowing it down. I have these cards where I have them actually pick their top 12, and then we narrow that down to like their top 5. Like, these are the 5 things I want to accomplish through financial planning. And so, and it's funny because they may have 10 different things. Like, he may have 5 and she may have 5, or they may have 1 or 2 that overlap. And so really, when we have those that overlap, okay, those are our top 2, and then we'll, address the other goals from there. But getting them on the same page, opening the door to conversations that are hard to have sometimes on your own. It's a facilitator to help kind of guide you through the process of setting those goals. It's not always easy. Like you said, you never thought about writing down your goals, having those goals together. But it helps for couples to be on the same page in why are we doing this? Like, what are we working towards? And if you are on mission together, makes budgeting and tithing and a lot of those things that we may talk about here in a little bit, it makes those things easier when we know we're like on the same team and we're working towards this particular goal.
Yes, that's good. And it creates probably a lot of peace. You're not like stressed to the max because I'm only 25, but like literally finance can be stressful, when you don't have.
I mean, money troubles are one of the number 1 causes of divorce. So, I mean, when you look at, the stress that it causes, and then that trickles into your relationships. And I looked up some studies because I know that's true, but I wanted some more recent data to kind of back that up. And, I think that, a study that Forbes advisor conducted found that people are emotionally impacted by debt-related stress. 48% of those people reported sleep problems, 40% had higher anxiety, 38% led diminished social lives, and 34% experienced depression. And then that financial stress bleeds into their relationships, and 86% of those people believe that their money stress is hurting their relationships. So like, if you have money stress, if you have problems, like, that's a huge percentage, nearly everybody, that it's like impacting your marriage and your other relationships. And that's never good as far as being on mission. If we're, trying to, as Christians, have goals, from a faith-based perspective, if you've got money trouble over here, that's impacting your marriage, which is going to impact your ability to minister or do anything else effectively.
Yeah, that's good.
It's all connected.
Yeah. Yes. And so one thing that I wanted to address was, I know in the church there's like, it's like avoid the love of money. And I feel like for people, probably the majority of us, there's like this mindset of like, okay, if I manage my money, or if I'm doing retirement planning. I mean, I've even heard a pastor call the Dave Ramsey show and has been like, is saving for my retirement, bad in terms of that. So it's kind of like this love of money has kind of transitioned to, well, then I just can't, have a savings account or save for retirement or things like that. And I really wanted to, through the Be Generous devotional and our conversation today, break that lie, because one thing that I've learned through us being, you mentoring me and your writer sense and growing in my faith, is that really I've learned that managing money has a lot to do with contentment and wisdom, more so than it does the love of money. Like, when you think about the love of money, it's really about, I want more. I'm not content where I'm at. I just want to consume. It's a lot of selfishness. Whereas managing money is like, okay, I'm putting priorities in place. And I love the story of Solomon. And whenever the Lord asks him, it's our first conversation in the Be Generous devotional. We go over the story of Solomon, and the Lord asked him, like, ask what I will give you. And he doesn't ask, he's literally a king, and he doesn't ask for more money or more territory or more gold. He asks for wisdom. And the Lord, and y'all, like Solomon was literally the most blessed king there ever was. He had the most money, he had the most possessions, but he's so humble in his approach because he says, how can I govern these people? How can I, a king, manage what you've already given me? And so it's this concept of like when we talk about managing money and being generous, really we're just asking, like, I need wisdom, I need to know how to manage what God has already given me. And then, because I feel like, Megan, I feel like a huge issue is we always think, oh, I need more, like I need my income to go up, I need, right, like I need more money, right, because of my lifestyle or whatever. And it's like, okay, there is a poverty level. I'm not saying there's not a poverty level, but maybe, probably for the majority of us, the issue isn't an income issue. The issue is a management issue. And what you're saying, setting goals, and like, are we being wise with what God has already given us? Because how could we ever steward well more if we're not already stewarding well what we already have, So
Yeah, how can he trust you with more if you can't manage what little you have? I mean,
yeah.
I can't quote where that comes from. I'd have to look it up, but I know. I mean, yeah, that's a parable too. I mean, as far as like, he's not going to trust you if with this more money if you can't manage, this. And so, I think the Bible talks a lot about money, but it's not from the perspective. And I, there's a lot. I've heard pastors that talk about, how important money was, because there's so many of the parables that relate to money. But I think at the core, what we have to look at, it's not really to focus on money. It's really the focus is on where is our priority and where is our alignment. It's because the lie that the devil tells us is that we need more and we need all of these other things. And so, Satan's whispering all of these contentment issues. Really, that's kind of at the core where we have to keep our contentment and our focus really on the Lord. And if we're not doing that, that's when all those other areas creep in. So it is the love of money. And it's also knowing that if it's all gone tomorrow, it wasn't mine to begin with, it's his. And so we're managing his money in a way that should help honor and glorify him and help point others, to Christ. I actually wrote something out because I knew if I didn't, I would miss something. Let me see. So really, there is a lie that Christians shouldn't be wealthy, that they should be poor. And to me, that's a lie that just doesn't seem to go away. And it's held the church back in fulfilling the Great Commission. The point of our life is not to get wealthy, right? So, I mean, I know that there's people who would even look at my profession and think, okay, well, how can you be a Christian and do what you do? But our goal is not to be wealthy. Wealth is not our primary goal. It's to serve Jesus and advance his kingdom, and that takes money. We have to have money for that to happen. Could God create it and just take care of it? Yes, but he chooses to use us as part of his mission. And some of us, are empowered with the ability to produce wealth, whether it can be through our business endeavors or other things. Maybe it's planning and setting goals and being wise with what he's given us. Our needs are met so that we can then meet the needs of others. If we can't even meet our basic needs, then we're not going to be able to help the poor and do those other things or support the missionaries that we want to support. So basically, we're not accumulating wealth to live lavishly, but, we want to live generously. And one thing Dave Ramsey said that has always kind of stuck with me is we're blessed to be a blessing. If we're not, we're not blessed so that we can fly first class and like do all these things and have all this stuff. We're really blessed so that we can be a blessing to others. And the Bible is very clear about the dangers of wealth. So it's not necessarily that money in itself or being wealthy is bad, but it's the danger of finding our contentment in that or letting money be our idol or finding our security in our money. If we look at our money, we're like, oh, I'm good, I've got plenty, and you feel comfort only in the dollars that you have in your account. That's the warning. That's the caution. And so to me, like the false belief that wealth is bad has held back us fulfilling the Great Commission. Like I said, God doesn't need our money to achieve his goals, but I think that he chose to rely on us as men and women to live generously and give for that cause. And so maybe we're not called to go, but we are called to give and support those that are in that ministry.
Yeah, that's really good.
But
Yeah.
I do think that's a misconception, and I do think that we have a hard time combating that lie.
Yes, for sure. And like I've even heard, yeah, that's so good. So one thing that I wanted to bring up is I read this awesome book called Bridges Out of Poverty. And I think I've shown you it before, maybe. Okay,
It's been on
so
my list. I need to read it, but I haven't read it yet.
no, it is like, y'all, look it up. It is so good. My mom actually gave it to me. And what this does is this book outlines the classes. So there's the lower, the middle, and the wealthy class. And it shows you like the class you were born in really affects your belief system and it really affects your perspective. And we talk about this in the Be Generous devotional. But guys, we always harp on the rich young ruler. And I was going over this book the other day. And what we don't understand middle class wise is we are looking at a wealthy class person and we are essentially making our conclusions based on our beliefs and our perspectives. And one thing that I really highlight in the devotional is no matter if you're born in the lower, middle, or high class, your basis of beliefs and perspectives when it comes to life has got to be kingdom based, not class based. You have to always go back to like, well, what does God's word say about this? Because I think a lot of times we mix them together and we put our class beliefs or our culture beliefs and the Bible and we do this. And when really Jesus calls us to like deny everything and lay everything down and renew our minds and take on this new perspective. Sorry, I'm pregnant, so I'm out of breath. But one thing that I really wanted to highlight that I thought was so cool was, and so breaking the lies that your class, for instance, we talk about the poverty class, and you will see in the devotional what each class believes. There's a driving force. Why do you do the things you do? For middle class, we do the things we do for work and achievement. And that is literally so true. I think about going to college and I think about like, even like my perspective, if I'm not productive, I like freak out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being so lazy, you know? And it's like this driving force. And for poverty, their driving force is survival. That's why a lot of poverty people don't understand how to manage money because they're not thinking futuristic. They're in like present mode. They're like, I'm hungry, I need food, I don't care, like I'm trying to survive, right? And so it's changing your perspective and renewing your mind. For the wealthy class, and I think this is why the rich young ruler left sad. I'm not a theologian, but from this book and reading that story, because he says, I followed all the commandments. And then Jesus says, okay, sell everything to the poor and follow me. And we look at his possessions and we say, well, why didn't he give up his possessions? He idolized his possessions and he left sad. But as the middle class, at least for me, what I didn't understand until I read the book was that the wealthy class, their love and acceptance, so you accepting and loving people, and their driving force actually has to do with one-of-a-kind treasures and possessions. And so for him to give up those things, he was literally, think about, he has a family. Like he has a mom, he has a dad, he has friends, he has relatives. So for him to sell everything, and for us middle class, that's not a huge deal. But for middle class, for God to say, hey, I want you to quit your job, or I don't want you to go to college, or I don't want your kid to go to college, like that's probably a big deal. Like that's like, what do you mean I don't want to, because our thing is work and achievement, right? And so, and for poverty, it's relationships. For God to say, hey, like I want you to move away from your family. I want you to move. Like that's a huge deal for them. So for wealthy, it's he was giving up the thing that his family probably loved and accepted him for, and the thing that, was the driving force for him. And so that's why I feel like he left sad, was because he had, I don't know if that makes sense, Megan, but I just, from
I
that
think so.
book,
He was going to have to give up his entire identity. So, like, is our identity in Christ, or is our identity in our family and our possessions and who we are in society? And I think that's, at the core, that's what his point was with telling him that. I need your identity to be in me and not in all of these other things.
Yeah. One thing I did want to add was, in the Chosen series does a really good job at showing this. Because even with reading the Gospels, it's not necessarily emphasized a lot. But when Jesus was doing his ministry, there was actually a group of women who helped fund his ministry. And so it's so cool to think about that, because just what you were saying, the importance of advancing the kingdom. Like, if we don't, as Christians, if we don't manage our money well, how in the heck are we ever supposed to like send missionaries or print Bibles or plant churches or whatever it is that we're trying to do? I mean, it's so important. Like, they had to fund the 12 disciples, and I'm sure they had to be strategic in, they had expenses, and they had to be strategic in, how are we going to manage this to help them fulfill their calling. And so I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I just wanted to emphasize that even Jesus was supported by generous people who probably managed their resources very well.
Yeah, they don't give us a lot of detail on those three women, but I think it's really telling. I think that they were there in their supportive role, even though they weren't one of the 12, or they weren't included in this, in the mission field. They were very important in the process and being able to fund and afford those missions. I mean, I think it's neat. I wish there was a little bit more detail. I wish we knew more, but I think that it's definitely mentioned, and I think it's interesting. That those women, whether they had their own jobs or they just were independently wealthy through their family and they inherited money, especially during a time when women were looked at so insignificant, to know that they were the ones, really funding behind the scenes and helping support from a financial perspective. I think that's really, really cool.
Yes. And real quick, one thing that I learned before we go on to your tips, you're going to give us tips on the different age groups. But the last thing, whenever I was writing the creation devotional, Joseph, we've heard about the story of Joseph many times, the robe of many colors. But one thing that I felt like the Lord really highlighted was when he got his promotion to be second in Egypt, Pharaoh had a dream. And Pharaoh's dream, y'all, this is like, I feel like the whole point in managing money. But Pharaoh's dream showed Pharaoh, hey, you're going to have 7 years of abundance, and then you're going to have 7 years of famine. And Joseph was so strategic in how he managed that, because he interprets the dream for Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh says, hey, I'm going to make you second in command. And what Joseph does is he took those resources and he did not waste them. He literally stored them up in different areas in Egypt and in different cities. And he stored them up. He saved, if you will. Like, he had a savings account and he saved them. So that way, when it was 7 years of famine, the people wouldn't die and they wouldn't die off. Like, they would have enough. And so I think I just thought that was so cool. And it's so important to realize, like, you're not necessarily saving money for selfish reasons. You don't know. I mean, I hate to be like, it's election year. You don't know what the economy is going to do next year. You don't know. You might have 7 years of abundance right now, but you don't know when those 7 years of famine, if you will, are going to happen. And so I feel like setting goals, what you were saying, like, it's so important to just be wise. And I'm out of breath. But anyways.
Maybe pushing up on your lungs. You don't have as much in there. No, I think that's very true. And I think that our generation, we have seen so many years of abundance that it's hard in recent history for us to even really recognize the severity of how things can be gone so quickly. were a baby or really young in 2008, right when we had our economic recession. I was right out of college. I was just we had been married for 2 years when the Great Recession started, and so that was a scary time, right, for young people. We hadn't, we got married and had literally very little, nothing. I mean, really, if you want to get technical, like we got married and had no money. So you're planning and you're trying to prepare and you're trying to save. And right around that time is honestly when we went through Financial Peace University. So we did it with a group from our church. And did I learn any financial things that were mind blowing or anything new that I didn't know? Absolutely no. There was nothing in Financial Peace from a money perspective that I learned or was new to me. But what helped us, we had always given, right? We had always given to our church and we had always made that a priority, but not to the extent it needed to be in our budget, right? It needed to be the very first thing we paid for. Instead of like, I've paid the bills and I'm gonna give. Like, we really changed our focus as a couple on this is the very first thing that happens before we do anything else. And it was scary when you totally shift the way that you give to where it's like, okay, well, I hope it's enough. I hope this doesn't break. I hope, I mean, we didn't have a lot, but it really shifted things for us. And the perspective around, our call to give and our call to support the church. And I mean, we grew up in church. We knew to tithe and to give and to support, but I don't think it was truly the number one focus in our spending, if that makes sense either. And so it was really getting on the same page together, being disciplined as a group. We were talking about it with our friends and I mean, that's not a normal topic of conversation that you just have, with when you're hanging out, unless it's something that's really important to you. But we didn't just talk about money with our friends on a regular basis. And so this kind of gave us that opportunity to do that and to really make sure that we were setting goals and being more focused and strategic. And so I don't necessarily, feel like it taught me a ton of new stuff, but it really helped us get the discipline. And that's really, to me, that's the biggest thing with personal finance or budgeting or managing your money, is a lot of it's just discipline. Yeah. And when we're making choices, today that impact us and others in the future. And so, I don't know. I think that it's helpful to go through a program. It doesn't have to be Dave Ramsey. It could be your new devotional. It could be a really good thing for a couple to do together that helps you get on the same page and just have a plan together. Yeah. Because it's really important, and it does bring you closer, I think, as a married couple. I think that it does.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. And one thing that I heard in college a pastor say, they said, it was really impactful. They said, because debt in our culture is so normalized. Mm-hmm. It's so, like, oh, just buy now, pay later. Like, you can do monthly plans, you can like space it all out. And when you read scripture, there's actually God doesn't really like debt. I mean,
talks about it a lot.
Yes. Like, if you really, look it up, I mean, it's not like if you're in debt, you're this terrible person. But he just basically says, like, it can be unwise. Like, it can really cause you. And I love what this pastor said, because they said, set yourself up. They were talking to college students. They said, set yourself up to where if God calls you to like leave the country or give or whatever it is, you're not financially in so much debt that it basically bounds you to it. Because, and I loved it was the husband and wife. I loved what they were saying, because it just really marked me of like setting yourself up to be open to, okay, God, because we talk about the tithe, and I've heard people say, well, I give 10%, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's also like, okay, what about the other 90%? Like, when you stand before the Lord and you say, well, I gave my 10%, he might be like, okay, well, how did you manage the other 90%? What if I wanted you to give, extra, to this person, or give it? And I think a lot of times because of how we live our lives, like, there are opportunities to give extra. And we make the excuse of, well, I got these bills and I got this and I got this and I got this. And so it's like not being open to the possibility of giving extra. Whereas like if we actually, like took the time to, what you're saying, discipline and self-control, and being like, okay, God, I'm going to open my, not just my 10%, but like I'm going to open whatever percent you want at the drop of the hat and give it. But I think that goes back to not putting yourself in the financial crisis of being in so much debt. Like I've heard the term being house poor, right? Like where your house is so expensive, or even your cars. I mean, like, just trying to set yourself up to where if at any moment he's like, hey, this is an opportunity to give, that you're able to do that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Proverbs tells us that the borrower is slave to the lender. So if you are a slave to the lender, then you're not going to be able to have the flexibility and the freedom and the ability to give and to serve in the capacity, because you're tied to this, and you don't really have a choice at that point.
Yeah. And Briston and I will say personally, Briston and I have like really, we only have like one small debt, but we have really tried to, like, we don't have any student loans. For the longest time, we had one car. Which I have narcolepsy. I don't drive that much, but still in a society where it's normal to have two cars, like I'm stuck here at my apartment because I don't have a car. I mean, I can call Uber, but anyways,
Yeah.
but like and then we're choosing to have a 1-bedroom apartment. Like there's sacrifices that you have to make. It's like oh my gosh, instead of doing instant gratification of saying I need this now, it's like even for his business, he didn't pay himself for the longest time. He just left it in there because, and rather than taking on debt, he started off really, really small. And so I do think there are creative ways, even going to college, because I know student debt is like a huge topic. Personally, I'm against it. I have seen the Lord provide. And it's kind of like, do we even pray about these things? Because that was one thing. I actually took the high school Dave Ramsey course, and he said, get school paid for. And y'all, it's not like I was like, oh, I know God's going to answer this. I just put it on a prayer wall and honestly did not pray that much about it. I should have prayed more about it, but God was faithful. And so, James says, like, you do not have because you do not ask. And just really looking at your motive of like, it's okay to ask for a car if you need to drive to work. You might not get the Lamborghini, but I mean, like, yeah, like you gave us your minivan in such the perfect time, because our truck transmission literally went out the next month. So for a month we had two cars, but then the transmission went out and you offered your minivan. And so it's like praying for things, and being okay, like knowing that it's okay to pray for those things, praying for school to be paid for. Did I have to like work, when like, it wasn't like money was just like flowing in. Right. We had to like work. And it's not like you're going to get, the bougiest thing. I mean, I thought I could get Texas Tech paid for, and God sent me to Southern Arkansas University, which I loved it. But like the cost is very different, 1 year at Texas Tech is like 6 years at SAU. So it's realizing like I can have these things and there are creative ways to get these things, but just self-control and patience, and realizing like, I don't know, Megan, just like this keep up with the Joneses mentality of like, you don't have to have like Plato's Closet. It has name brand stuff. You don't have to go to like the name brand place to get name brand stuff. Just go to Plato's Closet. That's where we used to shop, because it's like hand-me-down nice stuff. But anyways.
No, there's tons of ways to save and to make wise choices. I mean, I think a big part, like I'm in the season of life where my kids are really at a prime age to really start talking to them about how we spend and how we, give. And, my kids haven't spent a lot of time. Like my youngest one just started coming to church. Like she would go to children's church during our worship service. And so she saw us like giving and the offering last week, 2 weeks ago, I guess. she was like, well, I've never seen you give money before. I mean, it was like, and she's not a dusty sister, like, oh, they don't normally ever do that. I'm like, well, we do, but you haven't been here to see that. So like, she's 8, so she doesn't really know. She's just not been in there to see that before. So I think it's important as parents that not only are we doing that, but we're talking to our kids about it and we're explaining to them. I mean, I was fortunate that I had parents that taught me about that. But I think we've kind of come into within the church where we don't talk about giving like we should. I think a lot of pastors are scared to talk about it because they don't want to offend anybody or they don't want people to think that's all they talk about. And I don't know. I think sometimes we aren't doing a good job at teaching our children, those principles, and they're not being talked about like maybe they used to be. I don't know that I ever learned anything about giving through church. I learned it from my parents.
Yeah.
So I think it's something we have to be intentional about. That was something my dad was always very intentional about and talked to us about. And you mentioned printing Bibles. Well, my dad's very involved within the Gideon ministry, which everything the Gideons do is self-funded. So if you give money to the Gideons or I give money to the Gideons, like it goes directly to pay for Bibles. So like everything else from the organization, like the entity or travel or Bible distributions or anything, they pay for that themselves. And so if they go to another country or they do, it's always self-funded. And so that's to me, and he would talk to us about that and he would, and I would listen to him speak. And so I knew a lot of those things, but, the sacrifice of your time and your money, as far as just to spread the gospel and support other missions and missionaries too. But I think it's our duty as parents to make sure that we're not only teaching them to make smart decisions and plan, but letting them in maybe a little bit more into how we make financial decisions as adults. Because that's one thing I learned, like teaching freshmen personal finance. So many of these kids' parents have taught them nothing about money. And in my fact finding and part of like when I work with my clients on financial planning, one of the things that I ask them, one key question, and some of these people may be in their 60s, but it still makes a difference. What did your parents teach you about money and what did your parents teach you? And so it kind of opens the door for them to talk about their parents who may not even be living anymore. What did they teach you? And what have you held on to, those core values about money? Because it does make a difference. Not only how you grew up, whether it's poverty or middle class or wealthy, and then what did they pour into you about it? And so many of my clients have said, my parents taught me nothing. They either taught me nothing or, made really bad decisions and taught me what not to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to do that. So, but overall, I feel like that's something we don't like. Maybe we think, oh, it's none of our kids' business, so we don't talk to them about it. And, but I think that there's a really big opportunity that we miss out on by teaching them that it's more than just what we make or like what we spend, but like what are we doing here and what's the mission and the focus. And I've seen some parents even talk about, my kids are just kind of getting to that age where I feel like we can do more of this, but like sitting down together as a family and making those financial goals and giving things like what are our goals as a family financially instead of it just being the parent, like bring them into that conversation and let it be something that, they're involved with too.
Yeah, I liked that. That was really good. There's one thing I was going to add real quick, but it slipped my mind, so I guess it wasn't that important. You're talking about that was really good. Okay, so if I think of it, I'll.
Okay, sure. So
Okay.
tips, you want to do tips? I will preface this with like, this is kind of hard too, because to me, at the core of all of these like financial facts are things that we should be doing, right? There's always got to be that discernment of, not losing our focus, right? On why are we doing these things is like coming back to the focus of where is our heart. And like not that the money in itself or the wealth in itself is the primary focus, but it all intertwines. And so, so most of my tips and facts are kind of more financial facts and things that we should be doing at different stages. But at the same time, you kind of have to always keep that in the back of your mind too.
Yeah. Okay, real quick, I remember what you were saying about my grandparents, both sets. I love they started off like really poor. Both of them started off very poor. And to see where they are now and to see them give, like how much they give, it's like amazing. I'm like, I want to be that way, It's like they just had a drop of a hat if a family member needs something or like us grandkids. They are so generous, but they've also talked about like when they didn't tithe versus when they started consistently tithing. And saving for retirement, and like different scenarios in their lives where they did good things and then they did not so good things. And so just I don't know, I just want to encourage y'all to like have someone too that you look up to, that you're like, I want to be like that. Like when I'm that age, I want to be that person. Because that's also motivating. I feel like when reaching your goals is, okay, I'm striving to be like this person and give generously. And so your tips.
Okay. So let's see. So I think you had another question that I don't want to miss before we do the tips, and it was how to practically partner with your partner on your finances. So like some practical tips. And I think, you know, at the core, like what are our family's core values, and like having intentional conversations around that with your spouse, and creating big vision goals for your family. So like we're not thinking today, but like we're thinking, you know, multiple generations and how we're impacting. Your grandparents are teaching you about giving, so like they're impacting you from from that generation too. It's not just us and what we're doing, it's like how are we teaching our kids and how are we impacting our grandkids and that legacy that we leave, because giving is part of our legacy. We talked about SMART goals. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So like making sure that these things are they attainable? Can we do this? Obviously, there's going to be some, you know, spiritual component to this, because they may be things that we don't logically think make sense, but you know, God can provide those things for us and give us that ability. And I think at the core, remembering that Philippians 4:19 tells us that, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory. So like, you know, we have to remember that he's going to meet our needs, and we have to have faith in that. Our needs are going to be met. And as long as we are doing these things that glorify him, that he's going to make sure that we're not without. Even if another 2008 comes, or other, you know, financial stressors or things that could impact us with our jobs or our savings. Okay. So you said one personal finance tip for each age group. So I'm going to have a hard time. So some of them may have more than one.
Okay, that's fine.
So for high school students, I don't have time for a whole lesson, but study the time value of money. So you need to understand the time value of money and how important it is, because you have the benefit of time. You may not have the benefit of a big high paying job, but you have the benefit of time. And so if you will learn and understand how the time value of money works, and how compound interest works, and it's just a really beautiful thing. So I think that's really important that you understand that at 14 to 18, whatever. Like you've got a part-time job, start putting back and investing some of that money so you can take advantage of that time that you have. Number two, money is everything.
Oh wait,
do what? No, go ahead.
From a non-finance major, is it okay if I like basically what she's saying is the earlier that you start saving, the more it's going to grow. And the earlier you start investing, the more it's going to grow. If you wait till you're 30, even though you might save for 20 years, it's not, because of time, it's not going to grow as much as if you started when you were 16 or 17.
Yeah, you have to put in so much more to be at the same place. And so go to TikTok. There's tons of videos about time value money on TikTok, YouTube, whatever is most suited for you. If you're a teenager, you're probably going to like TikTok. But go type in time value money, and there's going to be tons of videos and things that explain how that works and what that looks like. And you can put those numbers side by side and see what a difference it makes. But yeah, money isn't everything. And so as you're like embarking on college and you're looking at what you're going to do and trying to make those plans, like obviously you need to make enough money to make a living. You have to be able to support yourself and your family, but God's going to provide for you. So really lean on him in what it is he has for you to do. You know, don't go be X, Y, whatever job because you just want to make a lot of money. It's really important that you're passionate about what you do, that you're called to what you're doing, because that's going to really make a big difference in the long run. You don't want to choose your career just based on whether or not it pays you enough. You know, I mean, it needs to pay you enough, but only like money being your only motivator. Money's not going to make you happy. So the college students, I really want to piggyback off that time value money thing. So like, that's still really important. If you miss that, make sure all of these kind of compound on each other, but realize that compound interest works against you as well. So like we talked a lot about debt. So time value money, compound interest, it's a beautiful thing when you're saving, but it can be detrimental to your financial future if you aren't wise about it and you look at the impact it has on your debt. So it works both directions. So we already mentioned, Proverbs 22:7 tells us that the borrower is slave to the lender. So just be really cautious as that 18 to 25-year-old range that you're not taking on too much debt, because it really makes it hard to catch up when you're always trying to play catch up on that debt. So getting ahead in that next, to have that safety net, to be able to really feel comfortable giving, you kind of have to really avoid a lot of debt. Number 2 for that age group is a car is not a good investment. So we've already talked about cars. That's fine, but you don't need a Lamborghini. You don't need a $100,000 car or whatever. You need a car that gets you where you need to go, that's reliable, but that doesn't have to be one that comes with a $600 a month payment or something like that. So the next age group you put in there was 26 to 35. So that's kind of a big age. That's a big swing. So mid 20s to mid 30s. So to me, it kind of depends. You guys, that's a big decade of difference, but you're really starting to raise kids at this point. More than likely, you're going to start having children. And we've already I don't want to beat this to death, but talk to your kids about money. They need to understand not only how money works and how you're making decisions, but really talk to them in a way that prioritizes giving and how you guys are making those decisions within your family. We've already talked about how so much of what we think and feel about money comes back to what our parents taught us and how we grew up. And there's just no way around it. That really, it impacts us. If you don't teach your kids what to do with their money, the world will gladly show them how to spend it. I mean, the world is going to show them all the things that they need and all of the things that they think that they need or they think that are going to make them happy. So it's our job as parents to make sure we're teaching them how we're saving and spending and making those good choices with our money. If you have children, it's really important at this point that you're creating a will and that you have an estate plan. So what happens to, Briley, if you and Briston are in a car accident? Who's going to take care of her? Those kinds of things that nobody wants to think about, but we need to be, making wise choices so that the courts aren't making that decision for us. And so having a plan and talking to your family or whomever and making sure that you have kind of discussed some of those things. And that's always really tough. It's a tough conversation. Nobody wants to think about it, but we do want to take care of our kids and have that kind of worked out so it's not so traumatic. It's going to be traumatic enough. You don't want to add an extra layer of financial worry or stress around that for your family or for your child. So the next age group you said was 36 to 50. And so that's a pretty big gap too. So that one's a little tough. So if you haven't started working with an advisor, someone to really kind of hold your hand through that process, I would really encourage you at that age group, you really need to find one. Find somebody you trust, someone that shares your values. I think is really important. It's more I talk about financial planning and investment management. They're two kind of separate things. So to me, with financial planning, I really feel like I come alongside my clients and we're really looking through their goals and really talking through a lot more than just, I want you to invest this money and let's, that's a little different thing. So making sure you're finding an advisor that's going to be there with you and help you, guide you through that process of setting these goals and making sure that you're on track for retirement. So really find somebody you trust, buckle down with the goals-based planning. At this point, if you're behind schedule, this is your opportunity. You still aren't so far gone that you can't make major lifestyle changes and start saving more and get in a good position to be prepared. But you're kind of at that, I got to do this now. If you wait till you're in your 50s, it's going to be really hard to make up for all that lost time. So financial planning is about so much more than money, and you need an advisor that understands that. It's about more than just the dollars. So then 50 and up, go ahead and kind of say the same thing. If you don't have an advisor that you trust, I really would encourage you to find someone that you trust that can kind of help you through the process, because it's more than just budgeting. There's so many more things out there that maybe you don't know about. Ways that you can save on taxes, ways that you can maximize your giving and your gifting to help you from a tax perspective. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into this that a lot of people just don't know. They don't. And so you have to get to know your clients, or me, I have to get to know my clients and understand their values so that I can help look for these strategies and tell them about things that can help them. So data tells us that 50-year-olds should have 4 to 6 times their salary saved for retirement. So if you had $100,000 a year salary, you should have $400,000 to $600,000 saved for retirement at that point at 50. So working with somebody can help you make sure you're kind of on track for that. And, another thing that I'd plug in here too is Social Security was only designed to replace 40% of our income. So it is our job. We usually roughly spend 80% in retirement of what we made when we were working. So 75 to 80% of what you are earning now is what you're going to need to support yourself in retirement. And only 40% of that should come from Social Security. So we have to make up that other piece. So, really at this point, if you're behind, it's really going to come down to your spending. And even in retirement, a lot of it comes down to our spending. So making sure that we are prioritizing our giving and, looking at our spending habits and making sure we're not overspending. Something that I really see in this age group too is they still haven't done estate planning. So maybe they skated by, they raised their kids, they never did any sort of estate planning. Or maybe you're 50 or 60 years old and the last time you looked at your will or your estate planning documents was when your kids were small. And so kind of going back to that, revisiting and saying, okay, at this point, you're looking at your legacy planning and giving in this, at this point, you've amassed some wealth. Do you want to incorporate your giving into this estate plan? And so that's really a common thing that I see as well, where we're working our church or we're working in other things into that giving plan. So you really want to make sure you've done that, and an advisor can help get you to that point, but you're going to need an attorney to actually prepare those documents. And so it's a little bit more than that too. Another thing that you would want to have is your financial and medical power of attorneys. So, if, at that age, once you get into your 50s and 60s, your risk of having a heart attack or a stroke or something that could impair your ability to make decisions for yourself, you want to have someone in place to do that for you. People don't think about this, but it does happen. I have a client who, has clearly had some memory issues going on. I walked in and kind of inherited her. She was here when I came. And so I really didn't get to know her in time to have helped them prepare for that. But she didn't have a power of attorney. I don't know her children. Her husband is dead. My hands are tied to really even help her because I can't do anything for her because she's not in the right mind to make those decisions for herself. And I know that. So it really puts even the people who want to help you in a difficult position when you haven't done the legal preparation to make sure somebody's there to help take care of those things for you. If that makes sense. But so, we want to make sure we're doing that. Even younger people, it's a good idea. I mean, if you're in a car accident and you can't take care of things for yourself, you want to make sure that your spouse or someone else that you trust can do that for you. And I added another age category because it wasn't in here, but it's another one that's important. So when you're 70 and a half and older, you can actually take your pre-tax retirement account money and you can actually do what's called a qualified charitable distribution, which means you can take money out of your retirement account and send it directly to your church or mission organization or other charitable entity that you choose. And you can actually give that money directly to them, and there's no taxable event that happens. So you don't pay taxes on that money. And it's really great, especially for retirees who aren't, they take the standard deduction, so they're not itemizing. So if you're not itemizing, those charitable giving contributions don't actually help you from a tax standpoint. So that gets I don't want to get too into the weeds, but if you're just taking the standard deduction, this gives you the ability to actually not pay taxes on that money and send it directly to them. And so that's a really great thing. I have a client right now who this is the first year they have to take their required minimum distribution. So at 73, you start taking what the government calls a required minimum distribution or an RMD. And that RMD is something that they've said, okay, you've put this money in pre-tax, you've never paid tax on it. At some point, they're going to start forcing you to take some of it out and pay tax. So what you can actually do, if you don't need that money, okay, if they're living comfortably, they can actually take that money and directly take that RMD and send it directly to their church or other charitable entity. And it's just essentially it's a wash. The money goes directly to them and you don't incur a taxable event. So it's a really cool thing to know about and to take advantage of. Recently in the client meeting, this guy came in, and as he and his wife were discussing, I started asking questions because I gathered that they were wanting to support this charitable entity that's an arm of their church. And so through that, I said, okay, well, there's a way we can do that better. You don't take that money and then go give it to the church. Let's send it directly to them. And that's going to save them $1,000 at least in taxes by doing it that way. So it's kind of cool. So I think, just finding somebody that can help you know those things. There's a lot of those little, I don't want to say loopholes because it's really not even a loophole. It's just part of the IRS code that maybe the general population doesn't know is there.
Cool. Okay, I do want to ask one more question before we end, if that's okay. Okay, so we were talking about giving and managing money. Is there any, what advice would you give for someone who maybe it's a friend or a family member who, like, is there any point, I'm trying to figure out how to word this question, enabling is what I'm trying to get at. So like boundaries, how do you know and how do you set up good healthy boundaries to know when to give to people and when people are using you for your money? You're like, does that make sense?
That's a really tough question. And actually, on the 50 and up, that was one of them I had on my list to mention, especially as you start having grown children, right? Or kids that are in college and starting to kind of set those boundaries with them. I think with your own kids, especially being very upfront and this is how we'll support you. This is what we expect out of you in return, whatever that is, whether they expect you to have good grades or they expect you to have a part-time job, you're doing something to help yourself, not just totally relying on mom and dad. But that's a really tough question. And I think there's so many variables that I don't know if I can really even answer. I mean, do they have a gambling problem? Do they have a drug problem? Are they just making really bad choices? Are you enabling bad behavior or are you helping them, as they're trying to help themselves? I don't know if I can even answer that. I don't know that you really can, other than just the spirit's discernment. You may not necessarily always know. I think that's tough. But I think sometimes we do enable bad behavior by bailing them out. Sometimes like they need to have those consequences so that they can, make better choices.
Yeah.
But that's not an easy thing to answer. And I don't know that I can tell you an exact way to know that. Because I mean, then obviously if there's a need and you want to, the Bible is very clear in supporting the poor and helping the poor. But it's also, clear that we're not looking for a handout. You need to be working, and the expectation is that you're helping yourself too. So, I mean, Proverbs is full of things about lazy and drunkards and things that are going to cause these financial problems potentially too. So I don't.
I liked how you answered it though. You're talking about bad behavior. One thing that Briston like emphasizes when he sees like the homeless or the poor is he's like, don't just give them a fish, teach them how to fish. And so it's the concept of like, okay, maybe right now they're hungry, so I need to fill their tummy. But once their tummy's filled, like I need to teach them how to actually go and get food because that's long term going to help them more so. Like Briston went to the grocery store and there was a lady. They were from a different country. They were immigrants, and she was like asking for money or food or whatever. And he was asking her, your family, where are you from, all this stuff. And she had a husband, and they couldn't get a job because I don't know all the details, but he like couldn't find a job to support his family. And Briston was like, well, why don't you, he's like, I'll give you $20 or whatever. He's like, you can go get a lawnmower. He's like, and you can mow people's grass. And he was like, which he's very entrepreneur driven. He's always like, okay, how can we but he was like, and she was like, oh, I never thought about that. It was just this. So it's also, I think giving is not just, you're also giving it wisdom and advice, and that can go a long ways more so than just the money part of it. But I thought that was funny.
No, I think so too. And I think, doing your due diligence on the organizations that you're supporting and knowing, that they are in line with your values and your, what you're trying to accomplish. So not only giving money to the food bank, but what else are they doing? Are they helping them learn other things that they could do or helping them find work? Or I know like our local homeless shelter here, they're not allowed to stay there during the day. So the expectation is that they're out looking for work. So they don't give them a place to like hang out all day. Like they're going to provide the meal, they're going to give them a bed, but during the day they have to be out
doing
looking
something.
for work. Yeah. So I mean, I think there's some good things like that that help maybe.
Yeah. And I know even Dave Ramsey talked about the organizations they give to have to align with like their, and I loved that because it's like, okay, if God calls you to give to this individual, do it. But there's also not it's okay for you to be like, hey, I have these standards. Like, I don't want you to just abuse my money. Like, I want you to I want it to go long term, you know? So I really liked
And
that.
you have to be careful to giving people money, like giving them cash, right? So like you said, he'll go buy them the food. I know, and I hate to even say this, but like Dusty one day was at the gas station and there was this woman and she was like, I really need gas. I'm trying to get wherever. And he was like, okay, pull your car over here and I'll fill it up. Well, when you went to fill it up, it took like 50 cents or something. It was full. Like she was just wanting him to give her money, right? It's like she didn't really need gas. Her tank's full. So he's like, well, like it's hard sometimes because you have those experiences and it's like, well, okay, well, I don't really want to give the next person that needs gas money, right? And that's where you have to kind of say, okay, Holy Spirit, if like I really need to give them money, you got to like prompt me and be attuned to that, right? Because it does make you a little bit frustrated because it does make it harder to want to give to the next person. But like if you give through an organization where they vet people and they know the need is there, I think that helps you feel better about where your money's going and that they're not taking my money and going to buy cigarettes or alcohol or
Yeah.
drugs or whatever else, right? Because you don't want to enable that, and you don't really know where's it going, or are they even being honest with me? So
Yeah. And then last thing to wrap up, something that I feel like the Lord has really shown me is Ecclesiastes talking about seasons and how, like, if the Lord calls you to stop giving to something, that's not like, sometimes we can be hard on ourselves of like, I have to give because, but it's also like, okay, well, where is God called you to give in this season that you're in? And you might give a little in this season, and then in the next season, he might call you to give more. So just realizing that like there are seasons to life, and it's okay if he's like, stop giving here because he might want you to give more somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very, very fair.
Well, thanks, Megan. So Megan, forward. I didn't mention this at the beginning. I should have. You wrote the forward for the Be Generous devotional, which comes out November 1st. A lot of the resources and different things that I use in there is because of her taking her class, her helping with More Outer Sense. So I really could not write that devotional without mentioning her, because you've just been so monumental in just this growth of personal finance. And so I'm super thankful for that. It's awesome getting to chat with you. We haven't chatted in a while.
No, thank you for involving me. It really meant a lot that you asked me, and it is just to me, in all the things that I do, if I know I'm helping somebody else, like that's where I find value in whatever I do in my work or wherever. Am I helping? Am I guiding? Am I mentoring in the way that I should? And so I hope, and it does make me, it is something that I'm thankful to know made a difference, I guess, if that makes sense. So we do a lot of things as Christians, and sometimes you don't know what seeds you sow or where that goes. So it's always good to see the fruit of your investment of time or money. And that's something we really didn't even talk about at all. We talked all about money, but your giving could be in your time. It doesn't always have to be in your financial giving. If you have skills and resources and things that you can give, your time is very valuable too. So.
Yes, thank you. And we might do some future stuff. I know you have a super hectic, busy life, so I want to honor your time, but we might do some stuff in the future too. So I'm going to ask you.
I would love that. And if anybody's watching and you have questions or whatever, Carly has all my contact information, so feel free to reach out if I can help in any way. I actually have 2 former students that are meeting with me this week, so they're kind of in that adult stage now too, and so it's kind of fun to get to see and be a part in that next phase for them too. So
that is cool. Okay,
yeah.
guys. Well, we're gonna get off, but the pre-order goodies for the Be Generous 2025 are open, so you can go to my website, which is linked on social media. And order those. You get a cute sticker, you get a bookmark, you get a signed copy. I also will write a personalized letter that I'm really gonna like pray per person about. And then it comes in a customized box. I know I'm like harping about this customized box, but when you get a package and it's in a customized box, it's pretty cute. So you get all that. And I will show you all the stickers when I get them in person. I've ordered them, but I'm just waiting for them to come in person. So be looking out for that. And you got to get them before the launch date, before November 1st. So you only got a small, about what, 2 months, a little less than 2 months to order those. And if I sell out of the stickers and bookmarks, then we sell out. So make sure to get them before the holidays. It's a good Christmas gift. It's a good birthday present. So, and I'll be doing some bundles and stuff later with the Leaning In and the Be Generous devotional. But so be looking out for that. And we're going to get off. But I hope that this was helpful, and let us know in the comments what you thought.